Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Bayer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast, and I am really excited today. I've got an old friend. I was thinking earlier about, it's a little bit of when Obi-Wan Kenobi meets Darth Vader in episode 4 of Star Wars, and he says, "I am the master now, Obi-Wan," and that's kind of the way it's turned. Tim and I have known each other since he was very young. We worked together, mentored him some, and now he's mentoring me. He is the master now. He's teaching me about podcasting and a lot of other stuff. So first of all, Tim, great to see you. Welcome to the show and to just a good conversation.
Great to see you, Mike. I've never been introduced as Darth Vader, or was I Obi-Wan? And you, what were you, and what was I in that intro you just did?
You were definitely Darth Vader, brother.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to embrace that. So let's do a Darth Vader episode.
He came out okay in the end, right?
It took a long time, though. There was some ugly there, but yeah, I'm into it. Good. Man, it's always cool to talk to you. You know, I think our biggest challenge is going to be keeping it to a length that, is not, hours long. So let's see if we can meet that challenge.
We will do that. So as I said earlier, so Tim and I go way back. We met, I was speaking in the very early days of Business as Mission. I was speaking at Emory at Oxford, which is an off-site campus sort of east of Atlanta. Tim is from Conyers at that time. And he came up to me afterwards. We clicked. We just started spending time together. Then we started working together. We did coaching and training and all kinds of other stuff together. And then, as God would have it, I moved away, he moved away, and we've kept in touch. And it's kind of neat to see, Tim, what God has done with you and in you over the last almost 30 years. I mean,
it's 30 years.
We're
Yes.
We're not showing the video this time, but we're two very young, incredibly good looking guys who look more mature than we actually are. So we'll put it that way. So Tim, this is about stories. So just tell us a little bit, and that's a very general question, but tell us a little bit of your story. I could talk about all the stuff you're doing now, but I'd rather just get the narrative of sort of what the journey looked like. Yeah, I know you were into all kinds of businesses. You hit some really rocky times. God really worked in your life through that. He's taking you to a whole new place. I'm not going to spoil it. I'll ask questions. Like you say, we'll play tennis and pitch it back and forth, but just tell us the narrative of kind of the last, not the whole 30 years on this podcast, but give us the big pieces that you think are important for folks to know about you.
Yeah, and I want to give a word. I've been using AI tools more and more for things, and it's really interesting, Mike, when I insert someone like me or you into my AI tool to generate a description, the word it keeps coming up with is seasoned. Tim Winder's a seasoned veteran of business and ministry, and, Mike Bayer, a seasoned BAM expert. So I think the word maybe we need to be using is seasoned, because that's what AI seems to, and it really does sound pretty nice. Maybe it's a kinder, gentler way of saying two old dudes talking.
I have to use AI more because I like that. I like the fact I'm seasoned.
I'm seasoned too. Yeah, maybe we're seasoned, either salty or peppery or, something like that. But I'm going to start off with something just to get people's attention. I am 60 years old. I've been married for 35 years, and my wife, Glori, and I have lived in a 39-foot motor coach that we've nicknamed Theo for the last 5 years and traveled around North America. As we're speaking right now, we're recording this in March-ish. Part of the countries are thawing out, and we've been in Arizona wintering most of the time. And so we've been doing that for 5 years. And the 5 years before that, we actually traveled with a little bit of Bible school kind of injected into it. We did 2 years in the mountains of Colorado. So my wife and I have been travelers now for 10 years. And so I'm continuing to go backwards. I'm going to back up to 2008. In 2008, one of the reasons that we have been traveling, in 2008, we lived in a big old house and resort community in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And we had some companies that most people would look at and say they are doing pretty well, and national coaching business, a lead generation business, and an asset company that had the capital and all included that was at the time close to $20 million in real estate. And some people are all of a sudden going to connect some dots right now that in 2008 we had 3 companies in real estate. And so to connect the dot to the traveling, 2008 doing well, 2013 we were homeless, bankrupt, and living in a Honda van by that point. We didn't have to go down by the river because truthfully I couldn't afford to get down by the river because I didn't have anything like that. But that's actually really more of the end of the story. There's a lot more to that, but that's really what I'll call a catalytic time in my life, Mike, because it really put not a comma, but more of an exclamation point on kind of who I was, identity, and who I thought I was, and what I believed my assignment was in God's kingdom, and all of that. So that's kind of the last 15 years. And the things that led me up to that, one of the reasons you and I connected so well in the late 90s or mid 90s, whenever that was from early on, I always really felt like I was wired to be a coach. Both my parents were educators, and I thought I was going to be an educator, growing up in the 70s and the early 80s. And the thing that I found out, and I may have told you this story before, but is at some point along the way, right before I, embarked on my collegiate career, I asked my mom and dad how much money they made. And in a true moment of truth, they told me, and I didn't know we were poor. I thought we were, upper middle or something like that. I found out we were poor, and I went, ooh, I don't want to be a teacher and a coach. So I went down the road there from Conyers, Georgia, went to Georgia Tech, got an engineering degree, and started doing business. And I was a kid of the 80s, man. I was chasing after the dollar. That was really what I was all about. And so that was probably something that was real formative to me. Have I ever told you that? Is that something I've ever told you?
That? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We talked about that. And I was just thinking about, I know today, fast forward to 2024, and a lot of what you do, and just go ahead and give a plug now, Tim has a fantastic and widely listened to podcast called Seek, Go, Create. And I know you'll tell us more about that. But part of the subtitle on that is redefining success. And so I take that tagline and then go back to 2008, and I realize, God took whatever you thought was success, and He took it from you. And you don't have to go through all the gory details, but I'm very curious to share with our audience, because a lot of folks that listen to this podcast they're around the world, they're doing business, they've had success, they've had failure, and sometimes they think they're in failure, and they're maybe listening today thinking, "Oh my gosh, it's over." You probably had moments when you thought it's over, because as you've told me, you pretty much lost everything. So again, not gory details, but walk us through the big pieces of that. And how God used that to speak to your heart about what success, and yeah, I know you're still on this quest, but what success really looks like.
Well, I'll kind of do what I just did. I'll say what I am doing to define success today, and then I'll layer it with kind of how that's kind of developed. Today, the way I define success, and I don't know that it is an ultimate definition, and I don't think anybody needs to put it on a wall or anything like that or create a doctrine around it or anything. But for me, success means identifying and pursuing as best I can my assignment in God's kingdom right now. And I don't use the word calling anymore. I'm not getting on to people that do, but calling to me is a little bit more of a lifetime, all that kind of stuff. And so what I like to do is I like to say, Lord, what assignment do you have in your kingdom for me today with, my skills or backgrounds, or do I need to learn something new, or do I need to pick up the phone and call Mike Bear and see what he's up to and try to be supportive of him or ask a question of him? Or so that's the way I define it today. Now, in 1982, when I, loaded up my, little zipper backpack and headed down from Conyers, Georgia to Georgia Tech, it was all about the money. It was 100% Gordon Gekko. Greed is good. And I was like, some people remember this show. I think Michael J. Fox played this character, Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah.
Was it Growing Pains or?
It was Growing Pains.
One of those shows.
I think that's right.
One of those shows.
Yeah.
And, but, and he was all about wearing the tie and going after the money. And truthfully, I still had a bunch of that. I'd gotten saved by that time. But when you and I met in the 90s, I was going after some money. And then, I had the Lord here because my wife kind of brought me to the Lord. That's a lot of people's stories, I know. But one thing I want to throw in here, because I think this is interesting part of the conversation. I popped in and out of a church a few times when I was growing up, let's say up to the time that I got married in a church, at 20, I was 24, 25. I can't remember. It's been a long time ago. It's been we've been married 35 years. I know that number, but I think I was about to turn 25. So Glori arrested me literally and figuratively and kind of got me going down that path. But I was still very compartmentalized, Mike. I wasn't super excited about what I saw in what I call church world. I was kind of wired. I was a kind of a take action guy. I thought I was a quick decision maker, thinker, all that kind of stuff, and could identify something and do it. I had a strategic nature. I was a industrial and systems engineer from Georgia Tech. And you know what? That translates to some okay skills in the business world. I think there's problems with it if it's not done in the right way. And so I saw some success. I had a company while I was at Georgia Tech, a business then, and then I worked corporate for a while and had just stopped doing that. I think about the time you and I met. Did some things in multi-level marketing, and I'll go ahead and say this. That's actually where I was saved. I was saved in a business setting. Yeah. I wasn't saved in a church. I'd walk in a church and I'd look around and this is me talking, keep your rocks in your pocketbooks if this offends you, but I'd see some mamby-pamby preacher and, he'd talk and, people would shake hands, a little limp-wristed type deal. And I'd say, that is not for me. I want to be making me some money and maybe the political arena, all this kind of stuff. And so that was part of kind of my makeup that kept layering. Now, the Lord kept chipping away at that heart and kept chipping away at things because I would have certain degrees of success in that business environment. And then some of it would melt away and have certain degrees of success. And, just enough of that drug to keep going to the next hit, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
And I know a lot of business people, they should get that. I know now that what I was doing was I was not serving one master. I was attempting to serve two. I was attempting to serve, from that middle section of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. I was attempting to serve God and mammon, and it's not necessarily money. There's the fame, there's the stuff, there's the pride, the ego. There's all that stuff that I lump into that mammon category. And I was kind of being a good guy here, doing the stuff, but then I was chasing after all that mammon, and those two worlds, they don't mesh very well, Mike. And so that's kind of the foundation that led to when we met, and then we did some things together, which was super fun. I loved it. I loved some of those things we did because I feel like I've got some skills in those areas. And again, I was wired to coach. And then we started doing real estate right at 2000. Did really well at it because I was a system guy. We were buying 3, 4, 5 single family homes in that Atlanta area every month, not every year, every month. And started coaching and every time I did something, I would migrate towards coaching and training whatever I was doing. And so that's what we built, did well right up to '08. So that was kind of where I was at that, what I call kind of a linchpin moment in my life.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tim. I think that period of time, a lot of people can tell a similar story. God used that time to, I'll say, pull the rug out from under people. That sounds cruel. God's not cruel, but he used it to as an awakening, an alarm clock, if you will, in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different lives. I know he did for me, different issues, but same things. Like you go through stuff like that, and you don't come out the same. You either come out harder and darker, or you come out lighter and softer. And thankfully, I think we both came out lighter and softer, even though we're seasoned. Let's be clear, we are seasoned. But when you went through that, it's interesting because working with you, and we became friends in the process, and it was just, that was all a good time. And I agree with your assessment, by the way. I do think you are a gifted coach, and we'll talk about, you have a coaching business today, which is and you wrote a book, by the way, called The Coach, and I read it, and I would encourage people to get a copy of it and read it. It's fascinating, good story, well written, and but you were a good coach. You always were, even when we were both a lot younger. I know some of our bigger accounts, you would go in and we'd do some strategic planning or whatever, and then you would go in and coach, and that was always a real highlight for people. They really enjoyed their time with you. I still remember your steno pad and how you would take notes when you coach is a unique way, but I agree with you. So coming out of that, you've kind of got nothing. I mean, the real estate market exploded, which is what set the whole thing off. And it needed to be set off, by the way. I mean, it was bubbles. It was more than a bubble. It was a house of cards, and the whole thing needed to be set off. You come out, and now you say, I lived in a van, but not down by the river. And so you got low. You got pretty empty. And of course, Glori's a great woman. She stayed with you. She stood with you, stood by you. Your kids are amazing kids. I don't know Joshua very well, but Dulcie she's a great, great young lady. And so your family still held together in the midst of all of this. What was the thing, Tim, in all of that? I mean, so you talked about trying to serve God and mammon, but there had to be something underneath that God was saying, okay, let me have this thing. Let me get inside and adjust this part of you. What was that for you? Because it really wasn't money. I don't buy that. I know you were very money motivated, but I don't think that was what he was getting at.
Yeah, I think, and again, obviously, there's been quite a bit of time to reflect, and hopefully, it's been reflection that's been helpful. I do want to say, I mean, listen, when I flippantly say, '08 things hit. By 2013, we were homeless and bankrupt. There were 5 excruciatingly painful years. And then there were many years after that that were still painful. And so I don't want to, you've got payments that all of a sudden you're going, okay, we're about to miss something and miss a payment. And so I'm going through that torture. I mean, it's rough. And I agree with you. I do not believe that God, forced anything on me, brought anything on. I do think that there was a Babylonian system structure that crumbled, and God said, ooh, here's a way I could get Tim's attention even more. Mm-hmm. And I think a few things that we had foundational was we had been growing spiritually. I mean, I'd been growing spiritually for 20 years or 17-ish years heading into '08. So I had some foundation. We had injected, I mean, we lived the 24/7-ish life of attempting to serve the Lord. And when I say ish, there were still some segments and compartments that I was probably not submitting to the Lord. And primarily it was my business and my finances. And here's the reason why, Mike. I thought that I was pretty smart. I thought that I was pretty good in business. I look back on some of that real estate now and I go, you know what? Were we really that good, or was it just so frothy and easy at the time that anybody, you'll tell I'm from Georgia here, could fall off the turnip truck and make money in real estate during that time? And maybe I did fall off the turnip truck. I don't know. But here's what this is what I got from that experience. To me, that I think would be helpful for someone that might be listening. And that is this. I believe that the Lord told me that he is not an ATM machine. And I was treating him like an ATM machine with my business and finances. I believe I'd submitted my marriage. I believe we had submitted our parenting and our kids. And I believe that was a protection for them during some tough times, because you brought it up. You hate to go down this dark path, but few marriages make it through what we did, looking at your wife say, hey, this 6,000 square foot home is gone. We're getting rid of everything. Pretty much telling our children they're out the door. They have no place to come home to. And you and I are going to, put a few things in a Honda van that's got 300,000 miles on it and hit the road. This is what I promised you almost 20 years ago when we got married.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't usually work out well. So that's quite the blessing. But with business, Mike, I would get an idea and I would go out and go at it. And you've been around me, so you could probably attest to this. I would go at a pretty fast pace. And the Lord just told me that he's okay with that. I just needed to pause and just make sure that we were still locked arms together, working on whatever this was. So really the last 10 years for me have been learning how to pause. Now I'm wondering at times if I'm pausing too much. The Lord's kind of said, no, you're good. I mean, I'm down here in Arizona. I'm in a pair of shorts and flip-flops, and I'm doing business. I'm doing work, but I'm operating at a different pace, and I've still got this, I think, engine inside, but I'm just kind of slowing down and making sure that I'm in that assignment that he has for me, going back to what you asked earlier.
Yeah, Tim, as you're talking, a couple of things just jump out at me. One is I love the pause, right? I mean, it's like in the Psalms, you're reading along and it says Selah, which means just literally just pause, right? Stop and think about this for a moment. Don't rush past this. So I think there's something in that for all of us that we need to, if we don't hit the pause button, God will hit the pause button sometimes for us, for our own good. It's not a punishment. It's not a discipline. It's not he's mad at us or disappointed. It's just, it's like, when your kids were little and they get to running too crazy, sometimes you kind of pick them up and just hold them real tight till they calm down, because you knew they needed to calm down. You weren't mad at them. In fact, you were loving on them like crazy, but you just had to hold. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was taking a kind of an extended time of prayer and thinking through different things. And I kept coming back to Psalm 46, where in verse 10, we're all familiar with be still and know that I'm God. I started doing a lot of study on the be still, an interesting word, because it literally just means stop, right? Just stop. And so I was studying the word stop, take a Sabbath, whatever way you want to think about it. And I came across a translation, and I want to say it was from Eugene Peterson's The Message, but he said, I think that's who it was, but he said, get out of the traffic. And that just has stuck with me, that I was riding, it's like, I was riding with the traffic. I was going with the flow, and it was fast and furious and fun and financially oftentimes very profitable. And it was like he was just saying, hey, just get out of traffic, man. Just get away and stop and hear what I've got to say. And that's, he's done that with both of us in different ways, and he'll do it again. Another thing I want to point out just quickly, because it really struck me when you said it, and I think this is a great lesson for our listeners. You were talking about your definition of success is fulfilling your assignment today. And that to me was the operative term, because it's not like, okay, I found the lane and this is the rest of my life. It's like, I love that you said, it's today. It's like, Lord, what do you have for me today? And it's not that we hear voices from the heavens all the time. It's not that sort of thing, but he can change it at the drop of a hat. He's certainly done it in my life. He's done it in your life. We thought we were going one way, and he goes, no, stop for a moment, turn left, turn right. And that to me is a really healthy view that you have of it. One other point I want to make.
One quick thing on that, Mike. The reason that's so important for people that are in what we'll call the business or entrepreneur, or they're quick starters, whatever, we could throw a lot of terms at them, is I've interviewed a lot of people over at our podcast at Seek Go Create, and this keeps coming up more and more. I recognize that I was addicted, not to money, not necessarily to even power, recognition, even though all that's part of it. I was addicted to more. I was addicted to getting to a certain place, scale, whatever words you want to use, to more. And that's not always kingdom. Now, people will sometimes argue, well, the kingdom's always increasing, expansion, and all that. No, I could think of examples where there's less. First shall be last, last shall be first. There's a lot of examples there. And then I interviewed someone else that they said they were addicted to tomorrow. And the reason why that today is so important for somebody listening is because I struggled with living right now. I'd be sitting here having a great conversation with Mike Baer, and I'm sitting here thinking about what's my next appointment, what am I doing tomorrow, what am I doing here, where I need to be so laser focused and force myself to focus on today, right now, this moment, this minute. Not everybody has to do that, but a lot of people in this business arena, business is mission. We've got an important mission because we're sharing the gospel. We got it, blah, blah, blah. Right now, who's in front of you right now, today?
We'll be right back after a short break.
I was thinking about, you say you were addicted to more. I think a lot of it's, different words, addicted to the pursuit, addicted to the pace, addicted to whatever. But all of those things work to take our eyes off Jesus, right? I mean, you think about it, you're running the race, Hebrews 2, you're supposed to lay aside every, weight that gets in the way and all the things that hold you back, and run the race looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And most of us, that's not how we're running it. We say we are. It's easy to say we are, but we're looking to the right, we're looking to the left. Who am I beating? Who am I ahead of? Who am I behind? It's nothing wrong with the race, nothing wrong with competition. But when that becomes the thing, the addiction, then it becomes a problem. There's a wonderful book, you've probably read it, called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. A brother named John Mark Comer wrote it. And at first you read it, it's like, this guy's weird. And then you start reading it and really getting into it, and you think, man, this guy's got some wisdom. And the idea, he even talks about doing real Sabbath, like Old Testament style Sabbath, Friday night, all day Saturday stuff. And I don't know that that's the answer, but I love the point he's making. And so, we are addicted to hurry. And he makes the point somewhere in that book, or maybe hearing him speak on a podcast. He says, I want you to imagine Jesus in a hurry. I can't, right? I mean, I can't. Not that I can't imagine him running as a kid or something of that nature, but I can never imagine him in a hurry. And so I think there's a huge message there for all of us, business people in particular, that says, whatever it takes, figure out how to stop every now and then. Figure whether it's walk outside every hour, whether it's go to Starbucks and just think as opposed to work on your computer, take a walk with your wife or your grandchild, just whatever it is. And I know, because I know you, I know that you're living that. You're committed to living that. You're not just saying the words, you're serious. All right, another thought. So you're in a 39-foot motorhome called Theo. I have no idea where you got that name. I'm sure you're going to tell us in a second.
Theopolis. We are in God.
Yeah.
We're in God.
I figured it's something like that, or theology, or I don't know. People think, oh, he's living now 10 years later, he's driving around the country in an RV. Is he like witness protection, or, is he still trying to escape the bill collectors? So, and of course, that's not the case at all. I'm curious, just because I know you, two questions. One, why the motorhome? And why now, 5 years later, still the motorhome? What is it? Because there's a whole world of folks out there that we're calling digital nomads. And they are traveling and working, through technology and doing productive work and all kinds of stuff. But they've chosen to live in a nomadic lifestyle. You have chosen, at least for this season, to live a nomadic lifestyle. So why that, and why still that?
Well, you brought up a great book by John Mark Comer, that hurry. There's also another great book by Greg McKeown, which is Essentialism.
Yeah.
And one of the things along the way, when you're being forced to get rid of a big old house full of stuff because you're not sure how much longer you're going to be able to live there, you start changing your perspective on stuff because you realize that we've accumulated quite a bit. So, as painful as it was, Mike, there was this extremely liberating aspect of getting rid of almost everything we own. I don't want to make light of how challenging it was, especially when you've got a life partner and a spouse that, there's kids stuff, there's quote unquote memorabilia, but we got rid of almost everything, forcibly or voluntarily or, along the way. And so when we kind of started heading out in that old van we had, there was something a little bit exciting about it, as challenging as it was. And so we traveled for 5 years and we did something very fascinating. This was like 13, 14, somewhere along that way. We didn't have any financial resources at all because some people are going to say, oh, well, you probably had some. We had some family that helped us. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord for that. Every once in a while there was someone that's like, I owed you a couple bucks. Here's that. I mean, we had nothing. We did Australia, New Zealand. We did house sitting. We lived in homes, Mike, that we did not own. We didn't have our name on it or anything. People would hand us the keys to their house. There usually was a pet involved. We were pet sitting. So we lived on the South Island of New Zealand for 3 months, watching an outdoor cat. So tell me God's not involved with that. Brisbane, Australia, Melbourne, Australia, places like that.
Yeah.
And so all of that, we were traveling, and Glory and I were beginning to really enjoy that. I mean, we enjoyed where we were in Georgia, but we were pretty planted like most people are. And I think people are called to certain geographical areas and they need to be there. But then also there is this go into the world scripture that sometimes we don't do that because we've got such deep roots of things that aren't of spiritual nature that are keeping us held down, held down there without going into detail. We know what those things are, your house and stuff like that. So we traveled, and then we were traveling, and in the midst of all that, felt like we needed to go to a Bible school up in the mountains of Colorado. So we were in and out of that. During that time, consulting, coaching opportunities started kind of coming into us all over the place. So financially, we started having a lot of resources come back our way, and we just kept living as modest or less than modest lifestyle as we could. And Glori got some work for a company out of the Bay Area in San Francisco, and they pay incredible, silly money. You know how they pay out there, but we were just traveling and all that. So all of that occurred. We went to Bible school, and when we finished up, we kind of said, you know what, we'd like to travel again, but what does that look like? We've got plenty of financial resources. We've got money in the bank. What do we want to do? And Glori, in a time of prayer, felt like the Lord said, you like to travel, but you don't like to pack and unpack. Why don't you get an RV? So this is some marriage wisdom just for those that might be married. She came out, she'd been taking a shower. She waited, she got that message in the shower. She waited a little bit and came out and said, I think I've gotten some instruction from the Lord, which we were really wanting to hear from the Lord. And she goes, I think the Lord wants us to get an RV and then travel. And the joke is I couldn't spell RV. I didn't grow up camping. I was sort of a city boy.
You did go to Georgia Tech, right? I understand that.
I'm a city boy.
In spelling.
Couldn't spell RV or anything. So anyway, 4 months later, we had purchased sight unseen this Theo. We've gutted Theo. We've made it our own. I've got office space. Glori's got office space. We've, got almost 400 square feet, depending on how you measure it. And so that's what we started doing. And so we started this journey of saying, Lord, where do you want us to go? And we would kind of go and, I told you before we click record, I kind of like hanging out in warmer climates when it's cold everywhere else, and cooler climates when it's warm everywhere else. And about a couple years ago, I would in my prayer time say, Lord, where do you want us to go? And I felt as if, I know a lot of people have problems with, thus saith the Lord, but I felt as if the Lord just kind of put on my spirit, Tim, where do you want to go?
This.
Where does Glori want to go? Where do y'all are mobile? You're nomads. You have very little tying you down. I know that if I give you instruction, you'll obey, but where do you want to go? So we started, laying out things. He goes, that's good. Y'all go. Go to South Dakota, go to Wyoming, go to, Southern California, go to places you want to go. So that's the story. Now we're at the 5-year mark at the beginning of, this year, 2024. And Glori and I will regularly say, hey, listen, do we need to get a piece of property? Here's our big challenge now, Mike. We have no idea where that might be.
Right.
We
Right.
really have if you were to, I know you wouldn't do this, but hold a gun to my head and say, Tim, you got to buy a piece of land or get a piece of property or settle down I have no idea where that might be, but we're open to it. So if anybody listening in gets, a voice of the Lord, I will attempt to discern it.
You got a piece of property you want to sell, Tim, right?
Sell it, give it, or I'm open to just camping out on it for a while, whatever. It's all good. So anyway, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it goes back really to that definition of success. Like right now, success is you and Glori, loving life together in a 39-foot RV called Theo, going where you want to go, which is that's a topic for another conversation. How can the will of God be what I want? And the thing is, it usually is. We think he's this killjoy takeaway, and he loves when his kids are happy.
I think as we submit and we allow our heart to be softened, then I believe, it's kind of like when our children mature, it's like, you know what, we could give them the keys to the car. You know what, we can give, I've done a little bit of training, but you know what, we're just gonna have to let it. And so after you do that, I believe the Lord says, okay, I've got somebody, you're not only in my family, but you've matured and you've gone beyond teenager stage and you've stepped into adulthood. It's just the unfortunate thing is it takes some of us, 55 years to get to that stage to step into an adulthood.
So let me, so we'll start circling the airfield here and coming for a landing, because I know, again, we could do this. You and I could go all day and our listeners cannot. So, couple of things to kind of bring us into real time. One is, tell us briefly about your coaching practice, because you do have a number of business clients that are not all Christian. Some are. I know that you're seeking daily to be a faithful follower of Jesus in the marketplace. So tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to have a follow-on question and get you to tell us a little bit more about the Seek, Go, Create podcast, which is, to me, is amazing. And I tell everybody about it, try to get them to listen. And then I'm gonna pull a Tim Winters and give you the last word. But tell us about your coaching practice and how people can get in touch with you and learn more about that if they have need. And then we'll talk about the other.
Yeah, like I said, I really feel like I still feel this way. I feel like I was really created to coach. And I've discussed this. I think in the world we're in today, coaching is one of the best, I guess, manifestations of discipleship. I think it allows us to disciple. It's like, I'm spending time with people. I don't have a microphone necessarily. I've done that some, but I don't have a microphone in front of a big group. So it's like one-on-one type thing. And so the title I use is executive coaching, and I don't know that it really captures it, Mike. I will work with leaders in business, organization, or even ministry situations. My ideal is if I could work with leadership teams, because I like to coach and work with an entire executive team. I'm working with one now. There are 4 or 5 people on the executive team. We do some of the old stuff we used to do, the strategic planning quarterly, and then we coach to those items that we strategically work on in between in the coaching calls. And then I also am able to connect some dots that only an outsider can connect when there's conflict or different things like that. I love doing that. I love doing it long term. I almost become part of that executive team. However, I will work with individuals. And the way I'm structured now, I've actually got a for-profit company, and then we have a nonprofit. It's a family foundation. And so if it's ministry or someone, then I think maybe fees or things like that don't make as much sense. I'll actually do similar, almost the same thing over here out of our foundation, our 501c3. So that's roughly what I'm doing. I love working with leaders and leadership teams. That's the best way of saying it. And is it real easy to give a sentence or two of exactly what I do? No, that's the challenge. But anyway, I've got, a lot of strategy, a lot of systems, a lot of conflict resolution, and a lot of years and scars that people like myself and you can bring to a table when we do that kind of work. So that's the coaching. Does that help with that? Does that give you a little
for
bit
sure.
there?
And have somebody get in touch with you to learn more about that if they want to.
Yeah, timwinders.com. Just go to my website, timwinders.com. There's actually a place there. And I would encourage anyone that might have been moved by something we've discussed to go there and schedule what I call a discovery call on the coaching page. And I'll get on the phone. I love the personal one-on-one discussion. I'll get on the phone and talk to, I was going to say anybody, just about anybody. Let's say that. Let's say that. So anyway, timwinders.com is where they could find all things that I do, the book, and there's also a link to the podcast there too if they want to check that out.
Right. Now let's talk about that, because I really think that you're having a lot of impact with the Seek, Go, Create podcast. I've been a guest on it. I must have said something wrong because I never got invited back. But the guests on it are excellent, and there are all kinds of folks. There's a guy that discovered his call out hiking and started a company called, I think, Let's Go for a Hike or something like that. You had a guy on recently from South Africa that's talking about what marketplace ministry looks like around the world compared to the way we do it, particularly in the U.S. You've had guys talking about the future of the church, the state of the church. You're not a deconstructionist, but you do challenge the way we do church, not church in and of itself, but the way we do it. So it's got a lot, and some of it's just pure business, and some of it's very straightforward, biblical, and some of it's, a blending of the two. I guess, tell us a little bit about why you did it, and then I'll come to my last word question for you.
Well, one of the things I realized, Mike, and you knew a lot about my personality, when we first met 20 something years ago. I was not one to shy away from, my thoughts, my opinion. If someone handed me a microphone or gave me the opportunity to speak or anything like that. But after all that went on, I felt I really was probably at its root dealing with a lot of shame. When your identity is, I'm pretty good at business, we've raised money, we've done a lot of stuff. When your identity is sort of that, you would say it's not, but then you find out it really is.
Mm-hmm.
You do wonder if you still have anything to say. And so I kept feeling a nudge. And without going through the long story, I finally in late 2019 said, okay, I'll get a microphone. I was in the front passenger seat of Theo here, flipped on all the stuff and just started recording. I really did want to start doing interviews because you were one of the early interviews. I said, man, I'm going to interview Mike Baer. I'm going to do Jim Cook, who's one of the original founders of Netflix, and, all these cool people. I had, still had a Rolodex that I wonder if young people even know what a Rolodex is, Mike. Do we need to translate my contacts? I had a contact list. Sorry.
There you go.
And so but the Lord, he said, you can talk to Mike and you can talk to Jim and all the, Jonathan, all these other folks that are friends of yours. But before you do, you're going to have to share your story, which is kind of like purging that shame thing, because, it's one thing for me to just say, hey, Mike, we've been through some tough times. It's rough, blah, blah, blah. But it's another thing to flip on the mic and, the episode 1 of Seek, Go, Create is titled Homeless and Bankrupt. That's the title of the episode. And you could even hear my voice quiver. I mean, I've gone back and it's like, okay, I could tell that I was quivering as I was attempting to get that out. But as soon as I did, I had people say, man, thank you so much for sharing. This meant a lot. We've kind of wondered where you've been, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. So that was the origin. The first season was all about that and kind of how that happened. Second season was me just kind of getting out some newer thoughts I had on leadership and the state of leading. And then And then I think I did one on just nomadic living because people kept asking questions, and I said I'm gonna put this in a season also. And so all that was the first thing, and then we started interviewing cool people like you and others, which is that's a great episode, by the way. But so that really is all about the name. I'll just give a brief: seek, go, create. It doesn't exactly speak to a lot of what it is, but in some of the darkest times that I lived out at a place that had 117 holes of golf. I didn't play golf while we were going through all the ugly stuff, but on the days that they had those courses closed, I would go walk those courses. And I would like to say I was praying. I'm not exactly sure that's what it would be called, Mike. I was maybe more crying out to the Lord. One of the most beautiful settings you could have, a golf course with multi-million-dollar homes everywhere. And the Lord gave me 4 words at the time. He gave me 3 words. One was seek, one was go, one was create. The 4th word that I don't have in the title is now. And that kind of morphed into that,
Right.
seeking his kingdom today, my assignment in the kingdom today. So that's a bit of the origin story. We interview a lot of folks. We're over 250 episodes now. And I would highly encourage, it's a great fit, I believe, for anyone that listens here. I think it's a great fit for business people that have a faith about them, to jump over, subscribe, listen to, just scroll through, listen, go back and listen to my interview with Mike Baer 2.5, 3 years ago.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm pleased with what we've been able to create over there.
Yeah, I agree. It's truly a great podcast, and I always look forward to every episode that comes out on Monday. And by the way, to listeners, you can also find information about it and get video clips on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, they're covering the waterfront in terms of getting the message out. And just another clarification as we come to a close, we're very open about our faith. Tim and I are both, believers. We follow Jesus, but we don't ever want to be perceived to be nutty, mindless, religious people. The truth is we're I think very down to earth. Tim, you certainly are. And your podcasts are not always with believers. Your podcasts are not always, they're not a preachy kind of thing. It's just heart sharing, you and another person. And it's really engaging. Every now and then you'll just have one that's just you sharing whatever's on your mind. And so I encourage our listeners to subscribe to Seek, Go, Create, wherever you want, whatever you get your podcast. So I'm going to do to you what you do to your guests. You get the last word. This is how Tim ends this podcast. We are Seek, Go, Create. Pick one of those 3 words that appeals to you today and tell us why.
That's one. I ask questions that I know I can't answer, and so you've kind of pinned me down here. So seek, go, create came to me in a specific order, and the specific order goes back to one of the things we brought up earlier, and that is that my personality, I have to pause first. So for me, that word seek is extremely important. And to me, seek means a lot of things. I mean, a lot of people, it's an action word. For me, it's more of a quiet word, but I've got to be still and quiet probably more often than I even am today. And I'm still and quiet a lot more than I used to be. So the word, and I appreciate the ask there, the word for me is that foundation, which is seek.
Love it. Tim, thanks for the time, man. It's been great. I always love being with you anyway, but it's just been great to be able to record you and our conversation. And I know it's going to be encouraging to our listeners. It's very different from most of what we do, and that's a good thing. I appreciate your transparency, appreciate just the way that you share yourself. And I love the coaching work that you do. Last plug, guys, the book, The Coach by Tim Winders. It is a really good book. It is a cool story. And I promise you, it's not what you think it is until you start reading. And it's really, really good. So Tim, thanks so much, man. All the contact information will be in the show notes, so folks won't have to worry about remembering anything. But thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Mike. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or tryventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen. The Business as Mission podcast is in partnership with TriVenture, the BAM Launchpad. TriVenture offers the 3 ingredients every entrepreneur needs to launch and scale a BAM business: courses, coaching, and capital. For more information, visit tryventure.com. If your business or ministry would like to sponsor the Business as Mission podcast, simply email info@thirdpathinitiative.com, and we'll set up a conversation about your needs and goals.